There actually is one story, Zach, that I wanted to quickly shout out. Let me pull that up because I thought this was a pretty cool local triumph. Let me pull that up real quick. Let me get the ad blocker in effect. But I'm not sure if you saw this, Zach. Proposed St. Charles, Missouri data center is dead for now. Obviously, Zach and I live in Kansas City, Missouri, not too far from St. Charles, which is outside of St. Louis. And this move comes after weeks of consternation from residents, reports alleging pollution concerns, and allegations that the data center site was largely owned by a relative of the St. Charles mayor. So that's pretty interesting. And obviously these things are going up everywhere, not just in America, not just in the Midwest, but literally all over the world. And a lot of them, Zach, as depicted in the movie Eddington, they were built in like 2021, 2022, before people were really properly grappling with the consequences of artificial intelligence, not even just the ethical consequences, but the environmental impacts, all that kind of stuff. So they were put in these towns and built saying, oh, we're going to provide employment. All these people are going to get a job. This is going to bring so much, economic viability to your town again, all this kind of crap. But little did the residents know the true nature of these data centers and the industries that they represent. Either way, it says the developer of a controversial 440-acre data center has withdrawn plans for the project. CRG, the development arm of construction giant Clayco, on Monday afternoon notified the city that it was pulling off the project off of the Tuesday's council meeting agenda. The city marked CRG's request as withdrawn, and this comes after weeks of consternation from residents, new reports alleging pollution and wildlife concerns, and recent allegations that the data center site was largely owned by a relative of St. Charles Mayor Dan Borgmeyer. It was doomed.
Borgmeyer.
Yeah, sounds like a fucking villain in a satire about a data center being built.
Yeah, God, the cheese Borgmeyer.
Yeah. Either way, luckily, this thing is not going to go through. And it really is proof that even though, we talk about how helpless we all feel as AI bears down upon us, not only as it relates to our economic security, job opportunities and stuff, but the environment. This is a optimistic story, Zach, because it is proof that as a community, you can fight back against this stuff and actually say, fuck no, not in my backyard, and it'll actually work.
Dude, no, that's very encouraging. I was totally unfamiliar with this story, and I'm glad that you'd been tracking it. I had not. This is the kind of thing that we have to encourage, that we have to celebrate, and we have to take as a win and a victory, right? Because you're totally right. Had this been 2021, 2022, before people had started to make a lot of noise about artificial intelligence, and honestly, back when people were a lot more naive when it came to cryptocurrency, right? That's another huge source of energy drain, and the stuff that data centers represent are also kind of the same problematic element of cryptocurrency, right? It drains so much resources from the community and it doesn't give anything back. We've seen, fracking equipment tethered up to all of these graphics cards, which is really weird to look at because they use graphics cards that are really good at, solving computational problems quickly and efficiently, and then these big giant fans to keep them cool. Those things are also popping up, and they're popping up in underdeveloped communities. One thing we should talk about is that St. Charles is not a wealthy part of St. Louis. It's a very underprivileged part of St. Louis. It's a very poor part of St. Louis, right? And it's on the outskirts of St. Louis. So they knew they couldn't get away with building one of these data centers right in St. Louis. One, it would be too expensive because the real estate is premium there, and two, because the people wouldn't fucking stand for it, right? So they're like, oh, why don't you go build this around a bunch of poor people who are too busy with their own basic needs getting met, their own survival, basically, right? If they are going to organize, it's probably going to be to talk about the large number of homicides that happen relative to their fucking capita size, right? The fact that these people are not being protected by the police despite the overwhelming amount of their local resources being spent on policing. These are the kind of things that you would normally hear about in St. Charles. And that's why they pick a place like that, because they're like, oh, folks here aren't going to raise a fuss. Thank God they did. And I'm hoping that stories like this become more popular and more common. You also sent me this encouraging article the other day, Gavin. MIT report 95% of generative AI pilots at companies are failing.
Clinker down.
Exactly. Good morning. Companies are betting on AI, yet nearly all enterprise pilots are stuck at the starting line. The Gen AI Divide, State of AI in Business 2025, a new report published by MIT's NANDA initiative, reveals that while generative AI holds a promise for enterprises, Most initiatives drive rapid revenue growth are falling flat. Despite the rush to integrate powerful new models, about 5% of AI pilot programs achieve rapid revenue acceleration. The vast majority stall, delivering little to no measurable impact on profit and loss. The research, based on 150 interviews with leaders and a survey of 350 employees and an analysis of 300 public AI deployments, paints a clear divide between success stories and stalled projects. So this, to me, says, companies are losing their ass on AI. And there's one thing that makes me really happy that makes companies sad. And that's when shady shithole Fortune 500 companies invest in something to screw their employees, and then they in turn get screwed. So I'm hoping that this will create a backlash to AI from a corporate financial level. They'll say, clearly this cake is underbaked. You guys sold us a bag of magic beans. You sold us an empty promise. You said it was going to save us all this money. It's just costing us money. All right, egg on our face, but we're going to scrap it and move forward. I'm not saying it's a permanent solution, but hopefully this staves off the worst things that we're expecting for longer, which gives us more time to organize opposition to it if it does return.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's not just going to completely go away. But what I do hope to see is less of these tech companies just kind of relying on it in a very lazy way. You see this all over various apps, but they're all integrating AI technology, but not in a particularly innovative or interesting or even all that helpful way. In my opinion, it kind of reminds me after TikTok blew up, Zach, basically every social media app decided, oh, we also have to try to beat TikTok now. So all of a sudden Instagram turns into Instagram Reels and YouTube introduces YouTube Shorts. And, there's this mad rush to replicate TikTok. Reddit, all of a sudden their video sharing capabilities basically mirror TikTok. And it was very annoying because it's like, that's not really the appeal of these apps. You have your own appeal. Don't just try to copy TikTok. If I want TikTok, I'll go to TikTok. In the same way, I feel like after ChatGPT got introduced, almost every single tech company and almost every single website tried to create their own ChatGPT. And it's like, oh, now if you type in something to Google, instead of getting classic Google results, you're basically going to get Google's version of ChatGPT answering your fucking question.
And it's often wrong.
And it's not what you fucking want. At least it's not what I want. Nope. Maybe the younger kids that have just been trained to fucking accept this, maybe it's what they want, but it's actually not what I want when I use Google. Every once in a while, I will use ChatGPT for something, as much as I hate to admit it. But in those instances, yeah, I'm going to use ChatGPT or I'm going to use Perplexity AI. I'm not going to fucking use Google. I'm not going to use fucking Facebook or Instagram or whatever and all these other websites that are just randomly integrating AI into their search engines and all of that stuff for no real reason other than to keep up in the race of technology and to have that on their page. AI. And you see this too all over advertisements for various services. Like they're advertising this new computer the other day, this new Dell computer. And it's like AI assisted, everything you ever need at your fingertips with AI, but it's all just fucking branding. There's a few little features like, oh, after a phone call, it'll summarize the call into an AI notepad. It's like, okay, that's a nice feature, but it's not exactly revolutionary. Let's be honest. It's not revolutionary. And once the sugar high wears off and the people realize that, okay, this isn't actually that revolutionary, yeah, I think they're going to realize that it's not worth paying that much money for either.
100%. And I also think one of the big factors for why it hasn't been as disruptive yet as a lot of the AI companies and the venture capital companies that were invested in them were kind of like, projecting that they would be, is because of what's revealed right here. It says workforce disruption is already underway, especially in customer support and administrative roles. Rather than mass layoffs, companies are increasingly not backfilling positions as they become vacant. Most changes are concentrated in jobs outsourced due to their perceived low value. And I think that's really important. A lot of the jobs that AI is coming for right now, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't be concerned with it, right? We should absolutely be concerned with it, but we should also understand that the jobs that are being taken away right now, the first ones to go in this massive AI layoff are going to be jobs that people outsource to other countries where they could exploit people for very, very low wages to do things like telephone support for 1-800 numbers, anything that could be taken away by like press the number 1, press the number 2.
But also shit like coding, I feel like is really a threat. All these AIs can just like code now.
Well, Apparently not, though, right? Because if they could be doing it without error, without correction, I feel like those companies would be using them to make a lot more money and not reporting.
Well, what I've heard is that a lot of times it does make a lot of errors, and then they have to hire humans to fix the errors. That's something in the translation industry too that my sister told me about. Like they have AIs doing all the translating, but then humans have to come in and fix the translation. Same with visual effects. The AI will do the graphic design, but then a human has to tweak it to make it not look too obviously like AI. So a lot of these jobs, they aren't being completely destroyed, but they're just being replaced by people that have to further train the AI. We'll see how long that continues, though.
That and I feel like that's the big question: is the AI going to be able to make the leap where it no longer makes those errors? Somebody in chat was pointing out how the graphic design is really, embedded with problems where it can't spell properly, and if you're trying to use AI to do graphic design, you're going to have to pay a human to go and fix anything that you actually want English or whatever.
Which is crazy, by the way. It seems like spelling basic words would be one of the easier things an AI could figure out. Like you have the word spelled correctly all across the internet, which is what they're drawing from. You think if like 99% of examples of a certain word is spelled a certain way, then the AI could figure out that's probably how the shit is spelled. But for whatever reason, it just is fucking stupid, and like I have no idea.
According to this,
according to the AI,
according to the AI itself, it does kind of make sense. They treat letters as visual shapes, not meaningful linguistic units. Their training data is heavily skewed towards images, not text, and they lack true understanding of words or grammar, often mimicking patterns rather than concepts.
Well, that's nice. Let's hand over all the power to something that can't understand meaningful linguistic patterns. Okay.
Yeah, that not super reassuring in the sense that I think it will just, lack that je ne sais quoi that makes us human, right? That's why I think now more than ever, the humanities are so important, because you're going to see AI be able to do things like code without error. You're going to see AI be able to create 3D models that a regular human being engineer was not going to be able to do. More sophisticated, more to scale, more lifelike in its replication, right? It's going to see problems that the human eye will never see from a math and science perspective, right? So what will then distinguish us as human beings? It will be the humanities. It will be the arts. It will be our ability to understand, hey, there is something about being a human that a machine can never take from us, right? And we will have to, almost with a religious fervor, remind and reiterate that to people forever, because I think that will be the fight of our time. This idea that human beings have innate value. It sounds insane that we're going to have to put it like this, but I do think that there is going to be that as the big argument, right? And because of that innate value, this is the dignity that they get to live with. We all are entitled to things like shelter. We're all entitled to things like food. Gavin and I have talked a lot about the pros and cons of UBI. I think that something like that will have to be instituted for the American people as we get closer to a reality where these machines are capable of doing these things without human oversight, at least as direct as we're seeing it now. And those jobs are, eroded. We'll have to come up with a way that we, can convince the masses to not just let everybody fucking suffer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, education is going to be important because a lot of people, especially people that are a lot younger than us, they're not even going to really understand those concepts, because their whole understanding of art will be through a lens of, or in a context in which AI assists in its creation or is 100% responsible for its generation. So it's really a straight up science fiction. I've never felt more like an old person, more like a boomer in my life when it comes to this stuff. Because do you remember back in the day before this robot technology took away everything that was great? It's just like, it's going to be hard to even explain. But I do think what's going to happen is that increasingly when it comes to the arts, there's going to be more of like a craft model of industry. Like if you think about beer, for the longest time there was the corporate beers, the Budweiser, the PBR. That's what was mostly available. Then all of a sudden in like the late 2000s, 2010s, there was like this big craft beer boom, and all of a sudden all these local breweries started popping up, run by people who actually gave a shit about the craft of brewing beer and making it taste good in various different styles. It became an art form. Not that it wasn't before, but it really became popularized as a craft art form. In the same way, yeah, even if for the next like 10 years or something, AI really takes over a lot of the arts, film, music, etc., I do think there will be a resurgence of true craft art, truly human-made art where, you know, you can label it no AI involved. This was 100% made by artisans. And that's something that I think, you know, it's unfortunate that that'll become like the minority instead of just the modus operandi for the industry. But I always do think there will be at least a niche of the population that is seeking out genuine art, not this fucking corporate slop.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And shout out to Guillermo del Toro for leading the way on that. Tweeted this out yesterday, but wanted to give it some props on air. Guillermo del Toro refused to make Frankenstein with too much visual effects and green screens. He says, I want real sets. I don't want digital. I don't want AI. I don't want simulation. I want old-fashioned craftsmanship. I want people painting, building, hammering, plastering. Amen. Fucking men. Guillermo del Toro. Guillermo del Toro is, I believe, one of the last true artists that we have with a national profile, who is from a foreign country, who can come to America and speak to people and be like, hey, we all need to, you know, recognize the threat, right? And I mentioned a guy that's an artist from outside of America. Americans are very hyper capitalist. Okay, we're willing to just be like, oh, this is new, this is big technology, right? Somebody from Mexico rather might be a little bit more, you know, familiar with the idea of saving custom and pursuing tradition, right? Understanding why craftsmanship matters, because we don't want to lose the legacy. We don't want to lose the way it's done. Guillermo very much represents that in his work. And so I'm just so grateful that, you know, he's a guy people will listen to because they love Pacific Rim, or they love Pan's Labyrinth, or they love Hellboy. You know, he Blade 2. He's crossed over into the American mainstream so much that people will listen to him. And I hope that they're all blown away by Frankenstein. I'm very excited to see it.
Yeah, quotes like this make it even more tragic that he was, you know, robbed of the opportunity to make The Hobbit. I don't know if you remember that episode, but he was originally going to direct the Hobbit movies.
Yeah, now he just has a story credit.
Yeah, exactly. Because they wanted to use, you know, CGI. They wanted to use these deep fake technologies and overly green screen. Del Toro wanted to do this. He wanted to shoot on actual sets. He wanted to shoot in nature. He wanted to actually employ artists. And the studios, you know, they were like, I think we'll save some money. And I'm really excited for Frankenstein. Even if I don't end up thinking it's a masterpiece, at least we have this to look forward to. And that's the great thing about an artist like Guillermo del Toro. Even his lesser films like Nightmare Alley, or in my opinion, Crimson Peak, which is good, but not one of his best films. You can watch those movies and just revel in the artistry, the on-screen artistry. Like Crimson Peak, for example, the whole house that movie takes place in, they built for the movie. That's almost unheard of.
That's insane. I didn't even know that. It's a gorgeous home.
It's a massive, huge, sprawling estate, and they built in this Gothic cinematic style. They built it all for the movie. So many real artists working, you know, creating that, really harkening back to the OG days of Hollywood. So I'm so glad that people like Guillermo del Toro are still, you know, practicing the traditional cinematic, artistic, you know, fashion, and you know, they're spreading the word about that, because it is really important.